Hi YouTube, today I'm going to be filming my labor and delivery story for when I had my daughter Savannah. It all started on April 21st. I actually think that was Easter. And it was already nighttime and the day was already over. My boyfriend was already in bed sleeping and it was still pretty early. It was like 9 o'clock, but I think he just like had a long day, so he was sleeping. And I was just laying in bed using my phone, watching TV, just relaxing, and I felt kind of like a gush. And it wasn't like my water like exploded and I was like, oh my goodness, my water broke, we have to go to the hospital. It was more just like I felt as if I had like my period and I had a little bit of like discharge coming out or something, but it was very like liquidy. There was no like, it wasn't like, it just felt like almost like pee, you know? So then I kind of just went to the bathroom and I was like, okay, this is weird, but I'm not sure if it's my water breaking or not because I expected something more dramatic. So I just kind of monitored it for a little bit and then it was still just leaking very little. So I started to think maybe this is my water leaking, but I didn't want to like just get up and go to the hospital because it was late. My boyfriend was already sleeping, so I just wanted to make sure that that is what it was. And over like the next hour or two, it was still leaking, just very, very little. And I was still unsure, so I called like the 24-hour nurse, I guess, that my OBGYN has, and I called them and she was like, you know, you can always just go get checked in, get checked up and see if your water broke or not. So she said just monitor it again for another hour, and if it doesn't stop within the next hour to go in. So that's what happened. I just monitored it and it was still just leaking slightly. I put on a pad and it wasn't even like the pad had leaked a ton. It was just maybe like it would have like leaked through my underwear, but not through like a pad. Regardless, I didn't want to risk anything, so around midnight I would say, I wasn't feeling contractions or anything. I woke my boyfriend up and we went to the hospital, and this is kind of where it became real to me that the baby was coming, because we get to the hospital and we go into the room where they check to see if my water broke, to see if I was dilated at all or anything. So the woman basically goes to check my cervix, and when she does that, as she's like taking her finger or like fingers out, my water like completely breaks. And that's when I was like, oh crap, like that, like I knew in that moment like, okay, she's definitely coming today. And then she was like, okay, we're gonna get you admitted. And yeah, and then I was like so shocked because I didn't expect it. A part of me did expect or think that I might be going back home and like being told come back, you know, another day, and that wasn't the case. So we get admitted and I get into the like the actual room that we are gonna be laboring in and delivering in. So right when the water broke, I would say, is kind of when my contractions started. They started me on like an IV drip, just like to have fluids and stuff, and then the contractions started. So I went into just like pregnancy and labor with the mindset that I wanted to go unmedicated for as long as possible, but I was open to the idea of getting an epidural. So initially I said, no, I don't want the epidural. The nurse said, okay, you know, whenever you want it, just let me know. So at this point, it was probably like 1 or 2 a.m. once we got into the room. And yeah, so I couldn't really sleep because I was very uncomfortable. I was very anxious as well, and they were constantly coming in to like check up on me. I had some paperwork to fill out, things like that, and they were constantly like checking, like putting like needles in me and doing a ton of stuff. So yeah, so I didn't know, obviously nobody knows right when they go into labor how long they're going to be in labor for. So eventually it was around 7 or 8 a.m. I want to say around like 8 a.m. that I decided like I want an epidural because the pain was horrible. So I went from basically 9, I guess, is when I'm saying that my labor started, because I guess that's when my water started to like leak. So from there to 8, about 11 hours, I guess, it was completely natural and I didn't get any like pain relief. However, I had thought that I was going to, that was like toward the end of my labor. So I thought that, okay, I labored for, you know, a decent amount of time, maybe like I was having contractions for like 8 hours before getting an epidural. So I thought, okay, so she should come maybe early that day. So I got the epidural, which was very, very painful, and then it like helped with the contractions, and I felt the pressure, but I didn't feel the pain. So I knew when I was having a contraction, but it just didn't hurt. And I basically just used that time to sleep because I didn't sleep all night. So as my contractions were getting stronger and closer together, I started to feel them more, and I was pressing the button to like up the dose, but my contractions were kind of just like overpowering the medication is what it felt like. My contractions were just too strong that the medication, even though I was continuously pressing the button, it just wasn't helping. And then at one point I just kind of like gave up, and I was continuously pressing it, but I just like realized, you know, I don't think that this epidural is gonna be helping me out anymore. So I would say the last 2-3 hours were just so extremely painful. I was not dilating quick enough, so they did start me up on Pitocin to quicken the progress, but there were a lot of small complications that went throughout. So when your water breaks, you need to give birth within a 24-hour like time period. So they wanted to quicken that process up so that I didn't have to like, you know, have an emergency C-section or anything. So I was started on Pitocin, and I was like 2 centimeters and then 3 centimeters and then like, you know, 5 centimeters for such a long time, and only in the last hour did I go from like 6 centimeters to 10 centimeters. So for the most part, you know, it was just like waiting and waiting to see how much I've progressed. So with that happening, while we were waiting, my body was losing too much fluid and like, you know, where the baby was. And I have never heard of anyone going through this or this having happening to them. So I'm not even sure like how to exactly word it, but basically because so much water was like leaving from my, like from where the baby was, they put a tube into my vagina up to where she was to kind of like put water back in. So I have never heard this happening to anyone. I don't know if it's something that's like common or not, but that is what happened. And then because of that, I needed to also have a catheter put in because I couldn't pee. And then I also had the tube to like detect my contractions, because the little like straps that they put on you, I guess, isn't as accurate. So I had just a ton of stuff down there, and it was just horrible because when she would move or something, I would like feel the tube moving too, and it was super uncomfortable. So the last 3 hours, that plus the pressure like on my lower back, plus, you know, just like the contractions and all of the pain and the epidural not working anymore, was just horrible. And I've heard a lot of people get epidurals and say like even the actual pushing part like was like not painful to them, but for me, like the contractions were painful, everything was just painful after a few hours of having the epidural. And that was regardless of when I pressed like the button or how many times I did. So during my labor, I also did end up getting a fever, and that was something that could be like a sign that your baby has an infection. So yeah, right before I pushed, so it was around, I want to say like 7 o'clock at night the next day, when we were around like 6 centimeters, and the doctor just kept coming in to check how often I was how much I was progressing. So around like 9 o'clock is when she came in, and she hadn't come in for a while before this one because I guess I just wasn't progressing enough. She thought that it would take a little bit longer, and she came in and she said, okay, like you're ready to push. So I kind of knew it because like I just felt like this like extreme like pressure on my lower back. So we get all like, you know, ready to push, and I start pushing, and in 15 minutes she came out. So luckily I only pushed for 15 minutes, and it was the most painful thing that I had ever gone through. It was like, in that moment I was like, I am never having any more kids. This is the worst thing in my life. I'm never doing this again. Now I look back on it and I do see it as like such a beautiful experience, but in the moment there was nothing beautiful about it. So once she was born, you know, we did like skin to skin, we tried breastfeeding, they did all her weight and measurements, and then she was taken into the NICU because I had a fever. During my labor, I did have to have an episiotomy, which is basically when they cut your vagina to make like room so you don't tear. So that was very like uncomfortable in recovery because I had the stitches there. So yeah. Another thing is right before I pushed, I just like threw up. It was like I threw up and I was like, all right, let's push, which is really weird. But I did hear that that happens to several people. I know I'm kind of like jumping back and forth, but I am kind of just doing this off the top of my head. So that was basically the whole like labor and delivery part. And then once, so she was born at 9:15. So then once she was born, they took her into the NICU and I went into the recovery room and I just like went to bed. I was so tired. I tried to get some rest, and I did plan on breastfeeding like exclusively, but like I just felt so horrible in that moment. Like my body was still numb a little bit, but I still like felt the pain. It was really odd, and I think it was because my body was starting to like swell up and I was so swollen the next like week and a half. Using the bathroom and all of that was pretty smooth for me. The first time that I needed to go, I went. It wasn't like super painful or anything. I did have the peri bottle and it helped a lot. I used Dermaplast, it helped a lot. So from 9 p.m. to the next day, I didn't go and see the baby in the NICU because I just like couldn't walk. I couldn't get out of bed. I felt super nauseous. I felt like I was gonna throw up or faint. There was one point where I did go to the bathroom in the middle of the night and I had to have the nurse take me because like I felt like I was really going to faint. So yeah, the next day I started to go and see her later on in the day, around like 12 in the afternoon was when I first saw her. And of course I was like super excited to see her, super excited to start breastfeeding. And yeah, so after that I would go to the NICU every 2 to 3 hours to breastfeed her, and she latched on really well. We didn't have any issues with that. Even though she was on formula for like the first 12 hours or so, it was not an issue at all. Sorry, she's waking up. So it was not an issue at all. And after 2 days, so I stayed there, like I slept there, I guess you could say, 2 full days, and then I was released in the morning and she was released from the NICU at night. So like I said, she went to the NICU because I had a fever, so they wanted to make sure that she had no infections or no issues like that. So yeah, they just like ran some tests and stuff and everything was fine. She had no infection, she had no issues whatsoever. So we were able to take her home that night. And that night was definitely such a scary, like anxious night for me because, you know, you're so used to having the nurses like right by you all the time, and like suddenly you're just on your own. I plan on doing a video on just like the first 3 months, I would say, of her life and how it was and all of that. But yeah, that was basically my labor and delivery story. The recovery was better than I had expected. You would think that after giving birth to a baby and like having your vagina cut, it would be a lot worse, but obviously it was painful to like just like sit on my vagina, but it was nothing like so bad. I would say the breastfeeding in the beginning hurt more than my pain from labor and delivery. And I will do another video on breastfeeding as well because we are still breastfeeding, we're still going strong, and it's been great. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. I'm so happy that I did this video because I would say that my labor was definitely interesting, and it was definitely something that I want to remember for the rest of my life, and I want to remember all of these details even if they were like not the best details. So yeah, we'll see you in the next video. Bye!